This is Cecile and Fanny from La Petite Creme. Welcome to episode number 7 of our Mom's Talk with a French accent. And today we are talking about connecting with baby.
Yeah.
So if you're here and you're pregnant or you just had a baby, welcome. We're going to invite our co-host. Hello everyone, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Dr. Perlman, welcome.
Good to see everybody.
Good to see you as well.
Yes, back in New York, where it's
Yes,
like 40s, but still nice. Still figure out ways to kind of keep warm.
Yes, exactly. So we're here today, as we said, we're talking about connecting with baby. Yeah. And we were just introducing ourselves. So we are Cecile and Fanny from La Petite Creme. We're the founder of a French diaper care solution and representing here out of sunny Miami. And we have with us Dr. Perlman. So if you want to give us a little intro about who you are.
Hi, I'm Dr. Perlman, Varisa Perlman. I am currently based in New York, and I am a pediatrician for 25 years and recently a health coach that works with parents to kind of untangle things where we could be happier people and happier caretakers. So that's where we are these days. Yep.
So we're really into the depth about what we are trying to achieve here is to provide a platform and some insight to fellow parents, because we're all mothers here, right? At different stage of motherhood and parenthood. Yeah. And we thought that getting together to share our personal experience and even like our professional experience to the table onto how do we navigate those critical time in baby's life and parents' life. So today is about connecting with your newborn and connecting with people around you in general, in the world of parenting and motherhood in particular. Yeah. If we want to write maybe in the comments why you're here, what you're trying to take from this conversation. If you already have a baby and you don't really know how to connect, or you're trying to navigate connecting with your newborn, or if you are pregnant and you're wondering what that means, maybe seeing the topic of the conversation, you're like, oh, I didn't really think about connecting with my child, or like it's sometimes it's the topic is not really put forward. We spend a lot of resources in preparing physically and maybe logistically to a baby, but do we really prepare to meeting that person? So, so that's interesting to get started there. I don't know. What was your experience, Varisa? You mentioned you had kids when you met with your baby.
Yeah, I think that I think the most exciting part when I was pregnant was just the idea that there was this energy inside of you, right? And I think that was the most exciting element, was to be able to kind of like gaze into their face again, truly see their face beyond what my imagination is of what that would be. I think I actually really, this is such an interesting topic. I felt like we've kind of like covered a lot of very concrete topics, right? Like picky eating and sleep and things that people commonly talk about when they talk about with children. I think something to be clear from the beginning, and it's funny when you talked about, you kind of proposed this topic. It's interesting because over the course since I've spoken to you guys and seen you, what I find is actually interesting that like we sometimes have, and it's nobody's fault, but there's always like kind of preconceived notions of what connection should be defined as. So I know that there is sometimes almost like a pressure on parents to feel this incredible connection with their family and their friends and their babies. And I feel like connection is one of those like incredible things that need to be nurtured and understood is something that changes with time. Sometimes, if you have a very stressful pregnancy. You know, you have a very stressful first couple of months. You know, things are difficult. And if we create this kind of mirage where everything is supposed to be this deep connection from the minute you see your baby, right? We kind of have this in our mind that this is how it's supposed to be. And maybe when it isn't, what you think it's supposed to be like, you feel like you failed in being able to connect with your children.
Yes, and it's difficult to know what it's going to be. We talked about that when we talked about eating and welcoming your baby home and all that. You don't know until you know. Like, yeah. there is no way to anticipate, even from one pregnancy to the next, of how you are going to be, because pregnancy and delivery is just like such a big emotional and physical turmoil that you only know what you are and how you connect and who the baby is once it's there, right?
Yeah.
Which makes preparation very challenging.
Yeah, because I almost feel like you can't prepare for that. You don't actually know if you are going to connect or what that's going to look like and to what degree and to what element. And I think that, again, I'm always going to push us away from kind of this performative parenting where we like kind of think we're saying the right things, where we're thinking the right things, right? But in the end of the day, parenthood is filled with ups and downs. It's you know, with like, you know, elevated moments and then moments that are like completely devastating. And I think that the more that we can kind of separate what is we are expecting from what is the reality in front of us, the better. Because it's like a specter, it's like a gaze that kind of like watches over us and makes us feel guilt. I'm always like cutting away guilt and fear, right? Because guilt and fear are pretty poisonous for parents. You know, it clouds your judgment, it clouds your experience. So if I had to kind of like, you know, what I feel in terms of like every experience in our lives, whether it be what we have during lunchtime, right? Trying to fall asleep, or, you know, going out with our friends, you know, the most that you can ask of yourself is to be present, which means that while you're pregnant, right, just let go of what everyone's saying pregnancy is supposed to be like. You know, one of the things that you talk a lot about, you guys talked a lot about is like kind of lifting a lot of the taboos. Mm-hmm. Meaning that like there are times like during pregnancy that you're not so happy, you're not so comfortable, you're really stressed out, you don't feel supported, you may not be connecting with your support network, right? Because you feel like you're not supported. I mean, there are a lot of emotions during that period. And the more that you try to kind of like gloss it over and say, wow, everything was fantastic, I love being pregnant, it's amazing, right? And just kind of keep kind of like perpetuating these myths, honestly, people will feel like I must not be connecting with my baby. I must not be connecting with this pregnancy because I'm kind of pissed about some stuff. You know, am I allowed to be pissed? Like, am I connecting with the right thing? Like, what am I connecting with? You know, and I think that is okay. I mean, I actually think that, like, I know that sounds weird, but like the bad times connect you as much with that child as the good times.
And yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, connecting doesn't mean you are in fusion or in complete like agreement. Like, connecting just means listening to one another, right? To me, it's more like willing to extend your hand and reach for the other one.
Yeah.
One of the questions that we wanted to bring up is like, we hear a lot about bonding. So what does connecting means? Why don't we use the word bonding? Are they similar? Are they the same? Because bonding is usually the term that goes with like you bond with your baby and it's important to bond, but we intentionally decided to go with connect.
Yeah. And I think that's fair. I think you're pushing the envelope. You're trying to push people past like the image that like springs to their mind, right? That like, you know, I'll hold this baby and all of a sudden I'll be like, oh, washed over. You know, there are many emotional moments that are actually incredible, right? But the most incredible thing is that children demand you to be present from a very young age. You know, even when you're pregnant, I felt like the first one, I felt like I was very present because it was just me, the baby, and my mom and work. And like, you know, my mom would let me just take like 2-hour naps in the afternoon, right? So like, I was very like, I felt like very present with it because I had support, honestly. You know, I felt like I was in a space where I could kind of allow myself to like get past all of the tasks, duties, and what's going to happen with this. Am I nervous about that? Like, I didn't get past it, but I definitely had a space for it, right? The second one is kind of tricky, right? Because this other being is demanding you to be present, right? And, you know, everyone's kind of like, well, you did it the first time, you know, suck it up for the second time. I felt like the second one, I mean, I literally joked about it, but I was like literally pregnant and I was like, oh my God, the baby came out. Like, I was just like, the second one went so fast because I kind of didn't have that much, you know, and I mean, you know, I had a hard time feeling really connected to that pregnancy because I was just spinning. So, so when you ask me, it's an interesting question because when you ask me, like, how do people like try to like connect with their baby? I'm not even sure, you know, the magic of the connection, I can't speak to, right? Because that's a very individual experience, but you will connect better with your child if you have support.
For sure.
Yeah.
So maybe the discussion is, you know, how do we best support ourselves so we can have those moments of connection?
Yeah.
Well, that starts at home, I would assume, like the support from within, you know, hopefully your partner, and also your family and your friends, who it's sometimes tricky to become a parent for the dynamic of your family. Like I remember just becoming a mom within my sisterhood and with my mom, like all of a sudden I'm not just a person, I become like, it's kind of graduating to something else. Like you become, you become legitimate in something, but you also are expected to become more legitimate when the day before you were not. So it feels like you're graduated without the certification, like without the training to it. And it's sometimes difficult because now people turn to you as now you're a mom, but you're like, I wasn't yesterday. And why do you expect me all of a sudden to be like all reasonable and put together and have my stuff, you know, figured out when I don't?
No, something that people always talk about is that it's not just the kid's first day of being there, it's also your first day of being a parent.
Your birthday by itself, right?
Go around too. I mean, like, you know, I mean, and even if you have a second kid, that kid's completely different. So there's no cheating. None of us come with like, you know, a layout of how the rest of our lives will be together. So knowing that nobody can cheat, right? No one's cheating, right? You know, it kind of levels the playing field because sometimes I do feel that, you know, you need to surround yourself with people who are really trying to honor your experience. You know, oh my God, you're feeling like that? Oh my God, my pregnancy was so amazing. Your pregnancy is like that? Oh my gosh. Wow, you must, and, you know, there's a lot of judginess that kind of exists out there. And I'm sorry, it's amongst women. Men, whatever, they talk about nonsense. They don't do this, that, you know, really, my husband will come back from a conversation with another guy. He barely even knows the guy's name. I mean, like, literally, I don't even know what happens, you know? But women, we start to entangle ourselves with each other, right? And in a good way, it's someone that you can be honest with. You know, surround yourself with people that allow you to be honest about your experience, about what you're doing, and how you are connecting. And again, I think it's so great to keep on describing connection is not always about only the positives. You know, connecting means that like we are like tied together, and we are going to go through this together. You know,
yeah.
A lot of times when you ask a little bit, it's, you know, my kid's 20 years old, 18 years old, it's a little cobwebby, but I do remember there was this incredible amount, especially with my first pregnancy, you know, with Izzy, I kind of felt like we were both like getting ready to be warriors together. And I'm not even sure what war we were planning on. But there was this kind of like a solidarity that kind of like, we are going to go through this together. And I think that the more that I allowed myself to kind of understand that, you know, like we always have this, again, this goes back to the helicoptering generation, this whole idea that everything should be happy. You know, life is actually textured, and it's not always going to be one note happy. You know, like, it can't be like that. And it's actually beautiful as on the ups and downs of it, right? And to have a partner in that, to feel like your baby is your partner with that, is an interesting, another model, right, of a way to connect with your child, right? And I want that to be important, because when you are kind of connecting with your kid in your pregnancy, you know, you talk to the midwives, you know, they talk about how the pregnancy really gives elements of their personality. That's why, you know, pregnancies tend to be different, because you've got different personalities. And that's the beautiful thing of actually, when you actually ask me, like, what has been one of the most beautiful parts of having children to me, is really, really honoring how different they are, how unique they are, and how they just kind of like, they kind of mess with my life, you know, in a totally different way, you know, better for worse, but they just kind of come in with their own energy that adds to my life.
And you're bringing a good point that I feel like we expect, and I know it was for my own first pregnancy, it took me the longest time to even think about a baby. I was pregnant, so I had a belly, and I had something inside that was growing into, you know, I would think about it, talk to it, but I couldn't see like a child. And then when my baby was born, the first thing I told myself when she came out was like, oh my God, it's a baby. Like, oh, as if I was expecting, I don't know, something else. But I was like, oh, no, there is a human here.
Right.
So, and it's an interesting thing that, as you said, it's not necessarily learning that the baby is a baby. It's like, who are you as a person, right? And it took me forever to link my baby to even a name. And call my child by their name. I was like, hey, baby, hey.
Yeah.
Finding like all kind of nickname. And I think it took me 3 weeks to be able, you know, to address my child with their name. And I was like, that's just, for some reason, there is a distance. I don't know if it was out of like getting to make sure the name was, you know, matching, or if it was a matter of like, we're not that close yet, like, you know, giving you a distance. But I noticed that. And I didn't feel guilty about it, but I was just like, it didn't come naturally to just embrace, like, okay, I know everything about you.
Yeah, I think I think that people need to be real, that like, you know, it's this is another person coming into your space, and you're actually, when you give birth, you actually have given them up, right? They have left your body, you know, and it's that kind of thing where, you know, even the word postpartum, right? They've come apart from you. And I think that in many ways, you know, your personality will, and the baby's personality will kind of like color how you interact. I think it's really interesting. I would love to kind of almost like amend the word, you know, like, why don't we just, you know, how to interact, you know, with your baby, how to interact with people around you, because I think connection feels like so, like you said, you're like during that time where I didn't call my baby by their name or I couldn't even come up with their name, right? Does that mean that like I wasn't connected to them, right? And I think that that's actually not true. I think that in many ways you were forging an interaction with them, you know, an existence of them and you that took you, you know, you're very, Cecile, you're very like, I don't want to say cautious, but you're a very like thoughtful person. You're not like a flippant, like, you know, like, you know, and so you're not like, oh my God, like, you're just not that way. You're very like, I think that you're really like feel the need to like be very authentic with your feelings.
Yeah.
Which is why we're here, right? Because I think that authenticity, right, drives you to kind of push others to walk towards that authenticity, right?
Yeah. It's trying to stay true, otherwise you lose yourself. I mean, if you're trying to be somebody else, then it eventually doesn't line up and
No.
makes me feel uncomfortable. So.
Right. It's that lack of authenticity. So I think that for you, I think that in many ways, like, it's, to me, people have energy, and they kind of need to be appreciated for that. And I think that, labeling things, and like, sometimes you'll see something, like, oh, this person totally looks like this name, right? And then another person is like, I don't know, like, does that really fit? Like, is that really what that name should have been? Or, and in many ways, that's true to who you are, that you're like, I don't want to just like impose my thoughts, of like what this person should be, right? I really want to feel that this person needs that name, like that name honors them.
Yeah, and getting acquainted, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's also level like you, I'm me. Like how? Oh yeah. Now what do we do for one another? Like,
like, it's like if I told you, meet someone today on Tuesday and Wednesday, give me their name, you'd be like, what? I don't even know this person. How am I supposed to like, But again, there's all these. Oh, you've been pregnant. Don't you know what name you should? And like, no, like, I don't even know. And it is a little bit arbitrary. We kind of pick our kids' names. They're kind of like, we don't know that much about them, and that's okay. That's the joy of it. That's wonderful. But I think that we are just always pushing to impose our views of what things should look like. And I think it really like colors and kind of like discourages authenticity. It really discourages it because, it's just, you really, when you speak to other people or when you present these ideas, people kind of would feel like, but what if I didn't feel that? Or when do I feel that? And it's that kind of thing where it's like, it's an evolving picture. Whether you like it or not, you are connected to your children. Okay, so let's just really kind of like lay it out there. Like, whether you like it or not, you are tied to these people. And good times and bad. I mean, this is even more than getting married. Like, this is like hardcore, right? You can't get divorced from your children, okay? So you can actually get divorced from your partner, right? But you cannot get divorced from your children, right? So assuming that connection is already there. The real question is that how do we create a healthy interaction? I think
that's pretty deep, because sometimes that interaction, as you said, it's not like what we see on social media or what the world is telling us. It has to be love at first sight, and it has to be like your heart is exploding when you. Sometimes you're just like, yeah.
Or you're angry. I mean, I've been at moments where I'm like, oh my God, can you not go to sleep? Like, go to sleep. Like, I remember staring at this little baby, and I could see the eyes in the middle of the night wide open, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, why are you awake? Like, I just, so it's like there is a whole lot of emotion that is the texture of your interaction with this kid.
So as a professional, do you believe that raw presentation of emotion? Because I feel like sometimes we are told as parents that, oh, you should not yell, scream, or like you shouldn't express emotion, basically, because it can damage your child.
Right.
What's your take as a professional on like how much emotion they can actually see and take from us?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that in the end of the day, like you said, this is our first time at it, and we are human. And I think that, there are times that, we may even yell and scream, and we may like leave the room, or we might be really, kind of like frustrated, and they are too. You look at a toddler, they don't seem to have any problems yelling and screaming, right? So like everyone's, can yell and scream. That's not, an issue. I think that what's a little bit more where I kind of fall in is when I really feel like a parent is just completely without resources and like completely without support. Because those moments when you kind of lose your temper a lot and you are just not happy, and you were really like, and I'm not saying you have to be happy all the time, but you're just frustrated to that end, it is our responsibility as caretakers and also society to provide support. So one of the things that So again, so let's assume that with children, you're connected with them. The question is that how do you connect with people around you so that you get that support? So it's kind of like shifting the focus, right? So with our children, we're always connected, but we could become better connected to our children, interestingly, if we have better support around us, I think.
Okay. So how do we
Right?
achieve that?
Okay. So authenticity is the word I'm going to keep on putting in your head, right? Do not think that like, oh, everyone tells me. I had a mom the other day that I was talking to, and she was like, I just, I go to these mommy and me groups, and I don't really like the other people there. And she's like, but I'm supposed to have all my best friends from there. Everyone tells me, go to these things, and I'm going to be, oh my gosh, they'll have a whole group of people, right, that they'll grow up with from this one mommy and me group. You're like, this is not true, right? It just isn't true. Some people it is. Some people, they go there and they meet their their besties, and they all raise their kids together. I mean, it's kind of like a movie, but most of us kind of like, wander around the world, and we connect with different people, and maybe with people that may not have children, or maybe people that are older than us or younger than us, and that's okay. Like, those are good connections. I mean, that to me is more, I'd rather you have more authentic connections than have these kind of like almost like superficial connections.
Okay.
I feel like you're supposed to have. My husband grew up in a building in Brooklyn, and he's like, he always had this dream. Everyone has different dreams, right? Everyone was like, some people, their dream is, I want to go to a place where I can open the doors and there'll be like 100 children running down the street, and my children will join in that, everybody will be all the same age. And my husband, that's like kind of a nightmare to him. He's just a very urban city kid, and his dream is that there'll be, an old man in this apartment, there might be a gay couple in this other apartment, there might be, there's other people who have kids who are teenagers, like, maybe one other family that has kids our age. Like, he always wanted us to live amongst a lot of other people, because he felt like it gave us a better perspective of what is really out there in the world, versus kind of like this like sheltered space. So when you asked me, like, who did we connect with? Who did we hang out with when our kids were, there was a period we knew some kids, but some of the kids we would meet like randomly at the park. It wasn't like in a play group, like something like, or, and it's that kind of thing where it doesn't have to be anything. It just is the way it is. Like, I would, like that's, I think it's really important to keep reminding yourself.
And also on the mommy and me type of group, because everybody is at the same stage of life, it tends to be also promoting comparison. So and then that can be very beneficial, because sometimes you're like, oh, you're dealing with the same thing, but more often than not, it's either verbally expressing that, oh, my kid does that, yours doesn't do that, or not verbally, just being like, oh, I just noticed that she did her hair today and I didn't have time to do mine. Or like, how does she do that? And it might be adding to that guilt and fear and all those feeling of not being enough, because you're comparing to people who should or feel like they should be on the same wavelength as you are, but you don't know what's behind those groups. Maybe somebody never put together except for that group, because it's kind of a platform to show off, or something like that. So you're right, if you just surround yourself with people that are different, then the chances of comparing might be less, right?
They talk a little bit, I mean, one of the things that's interesting, they talk a little bit about this idea of third spaces. I don't know if you've ever heard about it. So it's not your workplace, but like places where generally it's not much money, it doesn't cost a lot of money, but it's like places where people congregate. And in our modern day society, we don't have that much, right? So a lot of times, one of the reasons we personally moved from a very, very kind of suburban atmosphere in Michigan to more of an urban atmosphere in Miami, and then ultimately in New York, is that, we found that like in Michigan, it would be like 100 houses, right? And they would have one playground, right? But when you'd go to the playground, didn't matter what time of day, there were never any children there. So where are all the children, right? All the children are in the swings in their own private backyard. Everyone's in the swings in the private backyard. Nobody goes to the park, right? And it sounds strange, but we've kind of created this modern day idea that, like, things should all be structured. Why can't it sounds strange, but like, people used to like just drop off a kid at a friend's house, right? I'm going to do some errands, right? And the kid figured their way around that house or what was going on, right? And you got to do your errands, and you didn't have to make it into a play date where I'm going to now be best friends with the mom. Maybe I'm not best friends with the mom. Like, maybe I'm not really. Like, is that so terrible? Like, even as a character, you feel like, am I supposed to be best friends with this person? Like, just because my kids like each other, does that really mean that I should really?
No.
Like, no.
Too much connection here.
But that's, to me, I feel like, again, we have these ideas of how everything should be. And in many ways, what that can leave you with is the feeling of not being supported, of not being able to connect with who you're supposed to connect with. And I find that is where we start to feel, again, like guilty. Am I not giving them a good childhood because I'm not connecting with these people? And then who's their friends going to be? Like, I remember we would go after school when the kids were kind of younger. I would pick them up from school, and then I would go to this diner. And, if I went home, my kids would just like gorge on like junk food, while I was making dinner. I figured I would at least go get some soup for them, maybe a sandwich, and just let us do our homework. And then once we get home, I can play defense a little bit longer, But we would go there, and there's just this old man who was there all the time. And he had a little chessboard. And my kids were really young. They could barely understand, but he would try to teach my kids how to play chess, So, as he would go, and I would do homework with Andre, and then we would trade. And then, like, I don't even know his name. I don't even know who this person was. But he was someone that my kids, for some reason, connected with, and he connected with us. And he became part of my support group. He became part of, like, who was in my world for my children. And it was very kind of like random and kind of organic, and it was like a space that was there. Like, I have a guy when I walk down the street, my fruit guy, I buy stuff from him like once a month, but I say hello to him every day, that I see him, and he's a part of my support. I will probably never know his name. He will never know my name, but he is part of my third space.
Yeah, but it's part of also those element of stability, right? That people are here in that word. I mean, we talk about like a lot in the previous episode about like embrace the chaos, but in that chaos, having a few anchor points of being like, at least the fruit guy is still here. The fruit guy is still here.
I was going out of town. We were going to Miami, and my husband thought I was crazy. I actually did. I have so the person that takes my dry cleaning, she's this wonderful Indonesian woman. You have to go deep down into the alley to go see her. My husband's like, I'm not going. I'm like, she's wonderful. I go and see her. But I had to tell her that I was going out of town for 2 weeks, so she wouldn't be worried about me. And she said, oh, thank you for telling me, because I'm there like twice a week, And she's like, I would have been worried that something happened to you, like, again, I will never know her name. She knows my name, but it's that kind of thing where like she's part of my third space.
Okay, that's a really good concept because it feels like if we make that third space something tangible,
yeah,
then that means we need to allocate time to that third space, and it's okay to allocate time to that third space, right?
Yeah.
So it's not only personal, like home, work, but it's valid to have that third space be almost as big as the other two.
Well, they say that there are some theorists out there believing that part of our rise in modern day world for anxiety and depression is because we're like steadily like destroying our third spaces. We really aren't investing in our third space. And I think that it's tricky because, a lot of our third spaces, right, cost is an issue, right? So a situation where, well, can you join that club? Can you join that activity? Do you have enough money to join that, right? So if you don't join that activity, then do you have a place that you can go to? Not really, right? And so it's that kind of thing where like, parks, being able to bring your kid to the park and just kind of like, letting them run around randomly is something that is changing, you know, and we need those spaces because not everyone can afford all the classes and all the different things that people do. But there's something really wonderfully organic about them, seeing people from different backgrounds, you know, from different socioeconomic levels, to just kind of be amongst kind of humanity.
So then I'm going to open it to something that might be tricky, but does social media replace that third space, or how does it play in that? Does it feel like the more we grow as a society, the more the virtual takes over on a lot of aspects of our personal and professional life? So
I mean, like, this is a service, even what we're doing right now. This is a third space. This is a third space for some people, right? This is an hour out of, you know, we're here every 2 weeks, right? We are trying to create a third space, right? And I think that one thing that we're going to learn, that we are only learning because we didn't grow up with it versus our kids who did and are growing up. I think they're called alpha now, that are growing up with social media. Like, my kids grew up with an iPad, right, to like visualize, but there wasn't any like download and post part. Does it make sense? It was just like when you look at the iPad, you would just see random videos of them, right?
On TV, right?
Another way to like record people, but this download and post part is something that is now unique to Generation Alpha, right? And with Generation Alpha, one thing that I'm hoping is that they become wiser consumers of social media, right? Because, you know, when you watch TV, there's a lot of great TV and there's some awful TV, right? Same idea that like not all social media is bad. And I think that trying to use social media, I think the thing that's kind of amazing about social media is that people can literally physically live in different parts of the country or in different houses. You know, I'm working with a group of women right now who are like great girlfriends, but they're all working pretty hard. You know, they're all nurses. So like our space together becomes a third space where they can hang out with each other, but physically they're like one step, you know, like having to take care of a, you know, 1-year-old and also have to go to work. So like they physically it was very difficult for them to physically see each other all the time. So social media can be, if used in a productive, healthy way, a very good third space. And I've seen some other, you know, platforms use it as a space where people can just go there and like kind of like just like talk about like the texture of life. Now, where social media isn't great, and I think that is a lot of like posting the perfect pictures of your children, you know, the most amazing picture, like, you know, and I think that it's a kind of thing where some of that is good, but I don't think most of us naturally, you have to push yourself to be authentic. It's really tempting to post all the great pictures, right? And to all the good times. And that's just human nature. So that's no fault of anybody. Like, you know, who wants to like kind of do all, but at the same time, I think like you said, Cecile, like it starts to not feel comfortable when all you present is the positive. It's not good for you. It's not good for your kids. It's not good for like the world.
It's also a high standard to keep. Yeah. Like if you post like something good for, I don't know, a month, then if the next month you can't keep up, then you put yourself, like you put the expectation out there that that's the level that you're at, and you're setting yourself up for failure because it's like, oh, if I hadn't said that I was able to do that, then I wouldn't feel miserable for doing just average.
Well, it was interesting because there was actually a study done where they were, it's called a little bit about, it's a little element of frustration tolerance, but they would have children who were told, you're really smart. You're so smart. You're really smart, right? And the other kids are like, you're good, but you're like, okay, like you struggle a little bit, you're okay, right? And then they handed out a task and they said, this task is a really difficult task, right? And this task is a really easy task. Which one you're going to choose? And people would be like, oh, well, the smart people obviously are going to pick the more difficult one, right? Right? And the dumb kids, right? The dumb kids that we've labeled, right, are going to pick the easier one because they are like dumb, right? they're like, and actually it was the exact opposite. Smart kids were terrified of failing. And all the average kids are like, I don't care. Like, oh, maybe I'll grab one of them, right? And the truth is that when it comes to like kids, we're all like, when it comes to like smart or dumb, listen, when it comes to kids, of like raising children, we are all dumb. Like we are all novices, we are all inexperienced, we are all like just like trying our best. Okay? But if you start to like, oh my God, you're such an amazing parent. Oh my God, you're amazing. Oh my God, everything you do is amazing, right? And then something crappy happens, right? You're like, oh, I can't deal with that. Like, that's terrible. Like, it's so awful. When really it's not that awful. Like, shit happens, right? Like, whatever.
Exactly, yeah. You don't feel secure to say it yet.
Like, you have an unrealistic, but you want to maintain it. Like, you're terrified of losing that label. And that's where that dissonance, you know, between the reality of what we have to do, what our job is as a parent and as a person, which is to like remain present and authentic, gets kind of like cut right by this fear of like failing. And that fear of failure is something that we created that monster.
And it's easy to find, like we're guilty of that, like, you know, trying to just
Always
be on top of it, you know, like just trying to always be like, oh, it cannot not work. But then you always bring up the thing that it will eventually turn into something else.
it actually, and I have to say, like, and I mean, listen, I'm still like kind of like working with my life and my children and everything, but I feel like when there are those moments where like things are kind of like, right? Like I just like, right? I feel like when I come out of it and I figure some stuff out and I learn something from it, I'm like, boy, I would have never, I'm so lazy. Like I would have never pushed myself to get, you know, kind of get out of that if that didn't happen. Right? So it made me stronger. You know, so I think that is the only way that you can kind of look at the way that life kind of comes to you. You know, you have to kind of always be at the ready, because life doesn't, again, go with the chaos. Like go with the learning and like the pain, and then like, oh, I gotta figure this out. I gotta work through this, right?
Also opening up about, so if by now you've watched all the 7 episodes that we went through and you're like, yeah, I'm embracing the chaos, maybe we owe it also to one another to share that. And when people ask how you're doing, it's also like, okay, I'm surfing the wave, you know, I'm trying, I'm afloat right now, but also, yeah, sharing that it's okay to be in chaos, and being in chaos is a process, and enjoying that process is okay too. It's not like either I'm not good or I'm good. It's like I'm there, you know.
Well, you know, it's like, I feel like, so then when you, so when now the question that's on the table is that how do you connect with other people, right? And in a positive way that will feed you, right? So that you have that support, so that when you're with your children, you feel like present with them. So I'll give you an example. Like my kids, my son went to a performing arts college or high school, and my two great friends from there, all of our sons played music together, and all of our sons have their crazy, right? They have things that they do fantastic, that they're brilliant at, and then they have things where they're like just lunatics, like crazy, you know. And whenever we would see each other, like, oh my God, what do you do? Oh my God, do you do? Oh my, do you? And literally when we get together, it's not like, oh my God, my son is so amazing. It's like, my son is a freaking idiot. Like, why did he do that? We all love each other's sons. Like, we all love each other's kids beautifully. Like, and we support them. But we also know that, like, they're human, we're human, you know? And that's what joins us. That's what joins us. Not this whole, like, kind of like fanfare, everything is perfect. It's like, no, like, you know, there are like elements of like wonderfulness, and there's elements of like struggle, right? And that's what's woven us together.
And sharing that with other people who prevent you from sharing it in the bad way with your child, right? Because I firmly believe that there's an element of sharing also your you going embracing the chaos with your kid to some extent, so that they understand that you have no clue, and at least they give you some grace for like having no clue, so they're trying to be part of the resolution sometime when they get slightly older, but having the ability to vent. And we do a lot of that together. We're lucky enough to be close friends, and we're family at this point, so she know my kid, I know her kid, and we're good at unloading. We're like, imagine what happened. So it's good, because when we get home, we're more like, okay, the big part of the emotion is out, and now I can, take a step back and laugh about it, or just be like, yeah, Fanny agrees.
Someone is on my side anyway.
Don't feel like, I think that the hardest thing with modern day world, even with social media, is that it's very easy to feel alone. And I think that when I am able to share authentically with other people who may understand, I am allowed to not feel like I'm the only one. And whatever your experience is, I can guarantee you there are millions of people who actually feel as you do.
Yeah.
And I think that is the problem when you have children, because we've like created so much performative parenting, is that we've literally shut out that door, that window, because everyone's trying to kind of like put on their game face all the time. And in the end of the day, like, it is not easy. It is hard, and it's amazing, and it's fulfilling, but it is filled with emotion.
But it's hard to break that, and especially when you're a new parent and you're tired and your hormones are everywhere, to be able to crack that shell and be like, hey, it's hard. And putting words to it, because sometimes you don't even know. You're just like, oh, I'm miserable. But so finding the right people to listen to and be strong enough to say like, hey, I don't know, but something is not sitting right. That takes a lot of courage too.
Lots of courage. And I mean, so that's beyond the fact of like feeling more courage. But then if you have another layer of guilt on top of it, where it's like, you're not supposed to feel that way. Come on. Like, how are you supposed to feel supported ever? It just doesn't make any sense, And so when I'm actually able to kind of like, be together with other people that I can kind of like really like show my authentic feelings of what's going on with my kids, I'm able to come to my kids and really like value them for their good and bad, right? To really kind of see their texture, right? And to appreciate their kookiness, right? And the ways that they inspire me, and the ways that they drive me nuts, right? And I can appreciate and be present with them, because I know I'm supported, that like this whole experience is validated. I think we just need to feel validated that we're not crazy.
and that's a good, again, choice of word, because sometimes by support we feel like it's people who are doing stuff for us, but validation can come in many forms that is not physically doing something, right? Like as you said, you're getting validation from that guy at the diner just by the fact that interaction that you have is not supporting you in the sense that it's not babysitting for you, but is validating because he's engaging in your relationship and your parenting in some way, right?
Yeah, he's part of the space. He's entered the space where my children are, and our experience and his experience, and my children are like understanding that like they are not the center of the universe, and that there are people who are older than them, and that they should show them respect, right? But that they have a lot to offer them, right? That their experience is just as important as a little kid's experience.
And when we talk about like finding your village, like it's all like it takes a village. I think it's also representative. Again, the word has been chosen for that reason, that a village is not an army of old men in their 20s, right? So it's not an old woman with young kids. A village has older people, younger people, the police, the mayor, the cleaning people, exactly. So a village is a mix of a wide variety of people, because each one of them play a role into making a community.
Yes. And I think that a lot of times we gain, like, you know, even the crossing guard, you know, we gain, like, they were a big part of my life, right? Because as we would walk by, say hello, say thank you, make eye contact, you know, I mean, like, they were a part of my kid's life. But I think that people have to understand that, like, you know, you may kind of come home and you're like, oh my God, like, I don't, you know, I don't really do play dates. Like, I don't really do, like, you know, mom's group, but I just want to hang out with my kids at home. Yes, that's fine. And you've already kind of like experienced like the world with them. Like, you know, if they go grocery shopping with you, like, life is actually filled with a lot of people who are more than happy to be part of your village, right? And even just a hello and a goodbye and an interaction, that is still very valuable in kind of like validating your experience as a, you know, you don't have to do all that stuff that kind of like exhausts everybody, right? Your kids also need some downtime where nobody's in their space, nobody's in your space, you know, like everyone's just chilling. That is precious time as well, you know. But we just, I feel like, have all of this kind of, again, partially because of the way we are with social media, that like, I'm in this play group, I'm in this, you know, I'm in this mom group, I'm like, you know, like, oh look, here's 20 families all on vacation together, like, wow, you know, like, this is how it should be. And it's like it's a little overwhelming, you know, because I'm like, what the hell is this, you know? And so if you do that, fantastic, you know, positive, like, you've got like a whole group with you. But at the same time, right, you know, everybody's experience, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing a better job of connecting with your kids because you have this whole kind of apparatus, you know. It doesn't have to be like that. And I think when I was really thinking about what I wanted to like impart when we were talking about this idea of connection, is really kind of like throwing it out again. I think one thing that you guys really wanted to always do is like open the net, right? Like cast the net wider, right? So that people kind of break free from like what they feel like they're supposed to do. And maybe that's because of our experience of being, quote unquote, maybe like not of this culture, or being from an idea that, like, you know, you have to understand that there's like a million ways to cut this. And it can be very fulfilling in so many different ways. So you don't have to always feel like there's a prescribed way that like life has to be with your children. As long as it's authentic and you're present, you just can't ask anything more from a parent.
So we hope that is going to bring some peace of mind and food for thought for everybody who's watching this.
Yeah.
We're super happy to have you again, Dr. Perlman, and for sharing all these concepts, which our kids are already big now, but and we had those conversations before, it would have changed our journey for sure. So we hope that what we're discussing here will help other parents out there to hopefully get a better wave of that chaos on a daily basis.
Your whole, like, you know, suit on, with your whole like surf suit on. And I want to say shout out to the family that said they from Miami Beach, you know.
Yeah. Some pissed around here for sure. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll talk again in 2 weeks for another episode. And it was Cecile and Fanny from La Petite Creme and Dr. Perlman from New York.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.